Hi guys, it's Katie. Welcome to another food prep video. I'm going to start this week by making some bone broth, and I've showed this before, but it's really simple. I get these frozen beef leg bones and I just cover them with some water and cook them in my crock pot. So I cook them for 24 hours, and then after 24 hours I will strain the broth away from the bones, and that's what it looks like there. And I will pack this up into some freezer containers. So those are quart-size freezer containers, but I only fill them half full for the first batch, and then I put the bones back in the crock pot, cover them with some more water, and let it cook for another 24 hours. Then strain it again, and then I'm going to top off all of those containers. So they've been in the refrigerator, so the broth is congealed and the fat rose to the surface, and I just scraped most of that off. And I'm going to top off each of those containers with the second batch of the broth, and then those containers will go in the freezer. Next, I'm going to make some rice. I need rice for 2 meals this week. I'm going to serve some with gumbo on the night that I made this video, and then I'm also going to make a cabbage roll casserole that you need to add cooked rice to it, so I went ahead and just cooked it all together. And this basmati rice calls for it to be washed and soaked, which is a little different than I'm used to making rice, but I just put it in this container and put it down in the strainer down in the container. That way I can just pull that strainer up and it's already drained. That's a trick I learned from watching a Hyla cooking video. But after it's soaked for 20 to 25 minutes, then I'm just going to give it another good rinse to get the excess starch off. And then I'll put it in my saucepan, and I'm just going to cook the directions on the package. So you put 1.5 cups of water for every cup of rice. Bring it to a boil, then back it down to a low simmer, cover it and let it cook for 10 minutes, and then turn the heat off and let it sit for another 10 minutes. And then once it's done, I just fluff it up like that. And I'm going to pack half of it away to go in the cabbage roll casserole, and the other half we're going to have tonight for the gumbo. So you can see the gumbo simmering there next to it. So I'll just put a lid on that and keep it in the fridge till I need it. Next, I'm going to make some salad veggies, or wash some salad veggies. So I've cleaned up everything. I've peeled my carrots and trimmed the celery and cleaned out the peppers and just let it sit in a sink full of cold water. I just did it all at once. Now I'm going to pull most of the veggies out except for the lettuce and just let them drip dry in that strainer there. And the lettuce, I'll drain that water away and spin it in my salad spinner. I've showed this lots of times. I'm sure you know how to wash lettuce, but I just like to spin it dry, and I will put it in a container with a dry cloth in the bottom, and then just put the lid on it and it goes in the refrigerator. I keep the leaves nice and whole so that they don't brown around the edges. And then the other vegetables are also going to go into a container with a dry cloth in the bottom, and I'm just cutting those longer pieces down a little bit. So I'm putting everything into the container all together, and this is going to be my vegetables for just green salads for dinners throughout the week, and I'm also going to make macaroni salad. So I made a little bit more vegetables than I normally would, but I like to pack them all together, so when I go to make my salad, I just pull that container out and then my lettuce container out, and I have everything. And everything is pretty much prepared. It's peeled and washed and trimmed, but I don't cut it up into like the bite-sized pieces because then it's just gonna go bad quicker. So there's the salad vegetables all together. I'm gonna go ahead and chop up what I need for the macaroni salad. So there's some cucumbers and radishes. I'm gonna cut some carrots and some bell peppers. And I'm putting those in that large container that you can barely see there at the top. That's sort of an oversized container for the amount of vegetables, but that way the vegetables are all ready to go, and when I want to make the pasta salad, I will just boil the pasta and add the Italian salad dressing, and it will all still fit in that container, so I won't have to get another container, and then I can even serve it out of that container and keep the leftovers in that container. The rest of the vegetables will be for salads through the week, so I'm just putting a lid on it, and those will go in the refrigerator. And then there's the cut up veggies. If I was going to make the macaroni salad for just a day later, I would have gone ahead and made the macaroni and dressed it and just let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. always tastes better the next day anyway. But since this is going to be for 2 days away, I just did the vegetables, and they'll be fine for a couple days, and then I'll add the macaroni and the dressing the day before I want to use it. So I don't keep onions or mushrooms or things like that in that sort of communal pot, but I do like to take the plastic off of my mushrooms because it'll just trap moisture and they'll go bad quicker. So I like to put a cloth so that'll keep it from drying out, but it won't trap moisture. And the nice thing about having the cloth is you can go ahead and use that cloth to dust off any of the dirt, and then it's right there and handy. Alright, so next I'm going to make my bread loaves, and this is the recipe that I've made before for my sandwich bread. It makes 3 loaves. The only difference is this time I switched the all-purpose flour and the whole wheat. So it calls for 3.5 cups of whole wheat flour and 5 cups of all-purpose flour, but I switched that. So it just has a little bit more whole wheat flour than I've made it previously. And it turned out great, so I'm going to probably continue to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and make all 3 loaves. So I'm just patting it out and I'm forming it in this head and shoulders method that I've talked about before. I'm going to go ahead and do all 3 loaves, and one I will bake for use this week. So I just put that in a greased pan to rise, and the other 2 loaves I'm going to wrap up. And instead of using the wax paper, which was kind of a disaster last time, I got some freezer paper, and it's working so much better. So I'm just going to wrap those loaves up just to keep them a little protected from freezer burn and to keep them from sticking to each other, and then those get slid into a gallon storage bag and they'll go in the freezer. So that's what it looks like after it has risen, and it's not the prettiest loaf, but it'll be fine. Into the oven it goes, and then it bakes for 30 minutes, let it cool completely, and then slice it up. Next I'm going to work on a couple of chuck roasts. This is a twin pack, so I'm just cutting the package in half, and one I'm just going to put straight in the freezer whole like that, and I'll deal with it at another time. And then with the one that I'm going to work on today, I'm just going to cut it up. And chuck roast has a lot of connective tissue, but that's what makes it tender when it's cooked. You either need to slow cook it or pressure cook it, but it will turn amazingly tender. So you don't want to trim too much of that fat and connective tissue away, but there was kind of a big chunk that was a little bit too much. So I did trim that away, not too much. And once I have it trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and just cut this all up so it'll be ready to go. I'm not going to waste those scraps. They're going to go in my crock pot that's already cooking with my bone broth. If I wasn't already cooking this, I would have just packed those up in a little sandwich baggie, put them in the freezer, and then next time I made some sort of broth, I would have thrown them in there. So I'm going to cut these up into probably about 1/2-inch cubes. This meat would be really good in like 1-inch cubes or even 1.5-inch cubes because it does kind of melt down into really tender meat. I just cut it a little smaller to kind of stretch it a little bit in my meals. So I'm just going to cut it all up and I'm going to cook it all at once. So I put some coconut oil, which is great for high heat searing, and I'm going to do this in batches. So I'm just going to put a little bit of the meat cubes in my pressure cooker. I'm going to add some salt and pepper, and I'm going to fry it. You don't want to add too much. You don't want to crowd your pan, and you don't want to move it around too much. You want to let it get nice sear before you move it. And then once it's got a nice sear, then you can stir it around and let it get brown on all of the sides. And since you have to do this in batches, you kind of want to work while you're cooking. So throw a batch in to fry and then go ahead and continue cutting up your meat. So I am still cutting into the cubes, and I'm going to be using this I can use it for soup. I like my vegetable beef barley soup. You can use it for chili. I have a beef and mushroom soup that's really good. There's all sorts of things that you can use this for. So that's kind of why I have just simply seasoned it with salt and pepper. You can see there on that meat how nicely marbled it is. So there's another batch coming out, and I just put it on this plate as it's done frying, and then I put another small batch in and fry it up. So that's the last batch going in. Again, I'm seasoning each batch just with some salt and pepper. And once it's all fried and all completely browned, even if it's not cooked all the way, it's just got a nice brown color to it. nice flavor. You can see there's plenty of brown bits or fond on the bottom of that pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just deglaze it with a little bit of water and scrape up all of the brown fond. And then I'm going to dump all of the meat from that plate back into the pressure cooker, and I'm going to just pressure cooker it all together. So the pressure cooker, or you could do it in the slow cooker too, you just want something to break down all that connective tissue so the meat becomes really tender. The great thing about the pressure cooker is you don't have to add too much liquid, so just enough to cover the meat, and then you can pressure cook it, and that way that liquid that's in there with it is really concentrated. So if you're going to put this in the freezer, you don't necessarily need the full amount of water. You just need the flavor there, and then when you use it you can add water too, rather than filling up your freezer full of water. And because I had dumped the meat out onto the plate, there was a little bit of residue on the lip there. You want to make sure that's nice and clean to get your seal for your pressure cooker. And then I'm putting this on the high setting, so I think that's 18 pounds of pressure, and I'm going to let it pressure cook for about 15 minutes. And when it comes out, it's like fall apart tender. And this is why I think larger chunks would be better. It would be like awesome, but like I said, I just want to kind of stretch it out a little bit. So I'm just barely touching it with that fork, and it's like falling apart. Let's see how delicious and tender it is. So I'm just going to let it cool there, and I'm going to pack it up in those same great quart containers that I always use in these food prep videos. So this was about a 3-pound roast, so I'm going to divide it into 3 little containers there, and then cover it up with that cooking liquid. That cooking liquid has great flavor, and also, like I showed when I did chicken in the same sort of method, having that liquid covering the meat keeps it from getting dried out and freezer burnt. And then you have delicious cooking liquid when you go ahead to add it to beef stew or vegetable beef barley soup or beef and mushroom soup, or even beef chili. It's really good to use in chili as well. So I probably could have fit those into pint containers, but the quart containers is what I had. Probably could have also topped them off with some of my bone broth, but I didn't think of that either. The last thing I'm going to do this week is make some barbecue sauce. I will link this recipe down below. It's a really good recipe for a thick, sweet barbecue sauce that's sort of like Sweet Baby Ray's, which is a sauce that I really like. Now, I always like the idea of making things from scratch and homemade whenever possible. But in this case, I did use ketchup, which had high fructose corn syrup in it. Unfortunately, you can get ketchup without that. Also, this has a bunch of sugar in the recipe, and since I have to buy a bottle of ketchup anyway, I feel like maybe I could have just bought a bottle of barbecue sauce. So I'm not 100% convinced that this is a great money saver or a time saver, but the sauce is delicious, and it made a nice big batch. So I have plenty in the freezer, so I don't have to worry about buying barbecue sauce anytime soon. But it's got all sorts of great seasonings in it. Ketchup, and I use tomato paste instead of tomato sauce, and celery seed and garlic and onion powder and red pepper flakes, salt and pepper, and red wine vinegar. But like I said, I will link the recipe down below. But it's really simple. You just add all the ingredients, stir it together, and then it says to simmer it for 20 minutes. I let it simmer. I got it nice and thick because I want to brush it on chicken that I'm going to put on the grill, so I didn't want it too thin. I actually let this simmer for like 2 hours while I made dinner, and then we ate dinner, and then cleaned up dinner. I just let it simmer on low. As long as it doesn't scorch, you can let it simmer until it's as thick as you like. So it made about 4 cups. So I got 4 1-cup servings, which is plenty for what we use it for. So 3 of those will go in the freezer, and then 1 I'll use this week. So that's everything I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed it, found it helpful. Leave me some comments down below if you have anything specific that you would like to see, because I feel like I've done a lot of things and I do a lot of the same things every week, so I don't want to repeat things too often. But anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!